greatest joys of Magic is its diverse and deep pool of creature types. And whilst some get more love than others in terms of their volume, every type has its cards that really capture the player's imagination. So, we are going to go through some of the more niche creature types in Magic and see what flavour we can find. Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, the Magic the Gathering podcast, where we talk about all things Magic flavour design and lore. I'm your host, Andy Mam.
Hello, this is Nathan Cancel.
And we are back after taking a much-needed week off. I'm absolutely shattered from work. I'm sure you are as well, Nathan. Thank you for sticking around with us whilst we had a little bit of a breather. And we are returning with basically just more kitchen table waffle. This is going to be one of those conversations that I remember us having for hours and hours and hours and hours of playing Magic and just sitting around a kitchen table in one of our many houses throughout uni and just afterwards and just having these exact kind of conversations. And so when you suggested it, I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds exactly like what we need to do. So, I mean, Nathan, why don't you explain what you asked me this week and why you asked me of it?
Sure. So the question I asked Andy, or the offer that I proposed to him, was that we each give each other 5 creature types, and we will choose our favorite from them in terms of maybe it's flavor, maybe it's art, maybe it's resonance from our from our gameplay experiences. Basically, what was really nice is we haven't really done this a lot. We've talked about creature types a lot in general, but what's really nice maybe is to look at the creature type as a whole. Because very rarely do you ever sit down and just go, unless you're building a tribal deck, you just go, I'm just going to look at all the dragons for a second. I'm just going to have a little look see at all the dragons. So we had, I think we both also gave a varied selection of creature types / classes to each other. We didn't go for necessarily obvious one. There's a couple of tongue-in-cheek ones, I think, specifically. But yeah, in general, it's just nice to have a little sit down and look through.
Yeah, neither of us went for what's your favourite dragon or vampire or goblin or whatever. We've kind of gone for those kind of mid-tier, lower-tier creature types, which some of them are relatively popular, but none of them are hugely popular. I've also got to say for my 5, I avoid picking any legendary creatures, just because if you go, what's your favourite flavourful whatever, and you pick the legend that is that creature type, it's obviously there's a lot of flavour there already, so I've avoided that. I don't know what you've done, but it was actually surprisingly
not deliberately.
easy. Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't go for a legend at all. I didn't mean to.
Oh, that's cool. Well, there we go. Cool. I mean, so yeah, we've picked 5 creature types for each other each, and we're going to run through our favourites. And it's exactly the kind of thing which Magic players do all the time, or even just stupid bollocks in any fandom, right? Who could win in a fight between Goku and Superman? Do you know what I mean? It's who's your favourite this? Who's your favourite that? Who's the most powerful vampire in the multiverse? Well, should a vampire technically have a spark? Blah, blah, blah. All these kind of ridiculous questions that are really the kinds of things that we always sort of slip into these podcasts, even when we're doing maybe a more dry, a lore building or world building episode. We always seem to end up talking about something well, how would a magical magician work? Or musician? So yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I think I picked some good ones. I'm slightly surprised out the 5, actually, the spread of the 5 that I've picked. It becomes kind of clear what I find funny or what I like. 3 of them are almost essentially the same card. I'm oh, okay, that's fair enough.
That's interesting.
Yeah. All right, we'll tell you what. Seeing as your thing, I'm going to give you. I'll let you kick off with the first one that I gave you, and then we'll back and forth it like that.
Okay. So the first one you gave me was Centaur.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting one because I don't have a lot of affinity for centaurs in general. When I looked up the on Scryfall, because obviously this is the best way to do it, is going to Scryfall, chuck the creature into the type line and balls through them all. What was the most interesting thing I think about this this thought exercise was be able to see general trends across a creature type that you wouldn't necessarily have noticed or paid attention to initially, and I didn't realize how many centaurs like gaining life. There's an actual almost progression through the Ravnica sets of set of safeguards, which when it comes into play, when it's put into graveyard, you gain 3 life. It's a 3/1. Then you had Centaur Healer, which is a 3/3 that gains you 3 life when it comes into play. Then you've got Peacemaker, who's a 3/3 that gives each player 4 life. It's almost this progression of they get a little bit bigger and they gain you a little bit more life. There's also a bunch of threshold stuff with centaurs, which was quite interesting. I didn't really realise or notice because I didn't really play with threshold that much back in the day. And there's also a couple of strange design choice ones that I never noticed. Like, you tend to see, like, you know, humanoid right at the top as the like the body and the or at least the torso, the arms and the
Hmm.
head, as well as then the horse. But there's a couple that are like a little off kilter, like Leaf Dancer, for example. It's like an antelope kind of face, which
Yeah,
is really
so's
weird. See,
Sophic Centaur is a similar one. Yeah.
exactly, yeah, and I very nearly went for Sophic Centaur specifically because it was interesting, and it played into both this idea of threshold and life gain, whilst also being like an antelope centaur.
Mm.
But ultimately, what I went for was I ignored all the Selesnya side, and I went for a Gruul. I went for Burning Tree Shaman.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and so the reason why this I went for this one ultimately was that it triggered something in my brain when I first was playing through original Ravnica. Like, we just got to a point of like creatures being above curve. Like, you had Rolling Trembler, I think, which was like a 5/4 for 4 mana. You had Giant Solifuge, which was a 4/2 for 4 mana with Trample and Shroud, and then you had like Burning Tree Shaman. Like, I was an aggro player, right? It's like a 3/4. Right, so let me break the stats down. 1 red green for a 3/4 center shaman. Whenever a player plays an activated ability that isn't a mana ability, Burning Tree Shaman deals 1 damage to that player. Now, not only is it above curve as a 3/4 for 3 anyway, which when I was first playing, I was like, well, that's pretty strong. But it also punishes and continues to add extra damage on top of that, which, as I said, as an aggro player that wants to maybe, you know, struggles towards the end and needs a bit of reach, this card was really impressive. And it shored up like this roster of really powerful, like, rare Gruul spells that are all just like chonky boys that also do extra stuff. And I really like the flavor text because Gruul shamans are bent on punishing the civilized. Any act more complex than rubbing sticks together or eating with utensils is met with the stinging burn of their magic. And I just like this idea of no thinky, more smashy. No thinky, no activating things. No. You know, unless it's a mana ability, because the Gruul still don't mind, you know, having a little bit of evocation, a little bit more life to the party. It just evoked everything that I liked about Gruul. And again, it's base level, smashy, hitty. Really can't argue. It's super succinct. And again, it's still that stat line just being like, wait, it has upside. And this for me was the first time like creatures ever felt like, oh, you can have upside and be chonky. We look back at it now and they're like, it's only a 3/4 for 3. It's not even that good. Yeah, but back then, that was pretty strong.
Yeah. Centaurs are absolutely one of my favorite creature types, and like underrated creature types as well, because I don't know, there is something very high fantasy about them, and generally the planes that they're found on utilize them quite well, even if they're not a huge part of the world building. They always make whatever sort of like faction they're a part of, or whatever, seem to stand out a lot more than, say, like the 1,000th Goblin or whatever that we see. Looking through the card gallery of Centaurs, it's interesting. There are no mono blue Centaurs, which is kind of to be expected. I don't think there are actually any blue Centaurs at all.
There aren't blue ones at all, no.
But there's a mono in every other color. There are 2 mono black ones, one of them being from Magic Origins called Returned Centaur. That's a zombie centaur, which the other mono black one is also a zombie centaur. But this one is a return from Theros, and it's like one of the only times that we see a non-human returned. Which I just looked at. I didn't even know this card existed. I was like, holy shit, like that's a centaur with a death mask on. That's fucking cool. Yeah, I desperately want a centaur planeswalker as well. Like, absolutely. A Gruul one, preferably.
No, they've been doing insects and fucking dryads that have like tree mechs. Like, at this point, does the humanoid thing really matter anymore? Give us some diversity.
But it's mainly because we often see centaurs on planes that aren't necessarily the most technologically advanced. So places like Theros, or I mean, Ravnica is like, you know, it kind of does what everyone wants to do. But like, you know, things like Theros and Dominaria, all that kind of thing. Again, well, bloody hell, could they stop doing these high fantasy planes that are like obviously not high like tech, but then they suddenly have a random plane or something? I don't know. Anyway, my point being,
well, yeah, you had the fucking Thran back in the day, right? But now everything sticks.
The point that I'm absolutely failing to make with all my examples is that I'd love to see a centaur planeswalker travel to Kaladesh and get like some crazy mech for like their horse part of their body. I think that'd be awesome. Yeah,
oh, man, that'd be
centaurs.
Great. Yeah.
That would be great, right? Cool. All right, nice. Centaur. I like that. I like that a lot. My first thing, you gave me a fucker of a first creature type. I'm not going to lie to you. The first creature type you gave me was Avatar. What the fuck is an avatar? Like, really, in the grand scope of things?
So can I give you a reason as to how and why I got to my choices? Beyond a couple of them that I obviously knew automatically I was going to give you that I think will be obvious when we get to them.
Mm,
Otherwise, I just kind of went through like the alphabetized. I was like, what are interesting ones? And that's
mm,
the first one that came up. I was like, oh, this is really interesting. Oh, okay,
mm.
now my curiosity is piqued as to what you would go for, because they do span a fair margin and like a fairly
They
wide
do.
breadth. So yeah.
I mean, they often avatars. I think they use avatar to mean some sort of being of great power that is the essence of a sort of more theoretical concept, or
Mm.
the kind of amalgamation of like other like energies. And I know that sounds really broad. That's because it is fucking really broad. Like, so for example, you have more like tangible ones, like Gishath's sun's avatar, which is the literal embodiment of the sun, which on Ixalan made flesh like into a dinosaur. And then you have more sort of theoretical ones like I guess like Dominus of Fealty and like Demigod of Revenge, that whole Lorwyn cycle,
Mm.
right? But you also have things like, you know, the soul cycles. You have like the soul of Ravnica, the soul of Innistrad, etc., 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 that are like the embodiment of individual planes' essences. And even in the narrative of Magic, they've never really placed them in any sort of like scale of how powerful those beings are, because then they keep bringing in these other sort of like celestial entities, or these other kind of like theoretical entities, like, you know, that seem to usurp the soul idea. And they've kind of after the soul of Zendikar, they kind of dropped off using them in the
Yeah.
narrative quite
I
as
feel like
much.
you can't have a soul of Innistrad. A soul of Zendikar, and also a Shire. I feel like you got
Yeah,
pick one.
exactly.
You know,
Yeah, yeah,
pick
yeah.
one.
But then you have things like Arabo and the Ur-Dragon, which are kind of like the
Mm.
progenitors of all of a creature type across all the planes. A lot of the really defined ones tend to be the legendary ones, again, like Arabo, like the Ur-Dragon, like Evra, Halcyon Witness, all that kind of stuff. The one that I went for, and I don't really know why I went for it, it's just every time I look up and down this card gallery, it pops out, is Avatar of Discord, which is Rakdos, so the hybrid manners. Originally printed in Dissension, creature avatar, 5/3, flying. When Avatar of Discord enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you discard 2 cards. And the flavor text reads, such is the power of Rakdos, that even his shadow takes on a cruel life of its own. And the art is by RK Post. Now, I know RK Post is very popular with a lot of Magic players, and I know to say that they're underrated would be false. I think out of all the very popular artists in Magic the Gathering, I think RK Post is the most underrated of all the popular ones, if that makes sense. I don't understand why RK Post doesn't get 10 commissions every single set.
Mm.
Everything they do is wicked. I know they're like kind of known now for their tokens, because they've got a token store and it's got very sort of like illustrative like pencil style, but any avatar, any angel, like RK Post's angels are absolutely fucking rad. Basically any kind of celestial thing with wings. And I think they've got 3 avatar artworks that they've done. And absolutely all of them are brilliant. And I think that's the main reason I come back to this one. Because avatars, obviously, they're kind of abstract. They all have like their own kind of forms. Generally speaking, they tend to be kind of giant in size. And they often have either wings of some description, or they have some sort of like presence and stature that makes like the wings kind of redundant, because they kind of tower over everything anyway. And just the look of this one. So this, I mean, being in Dissension, so the Ravnica in the original Ravnica blog, Ravnica wasn't quite as defined as it was even by Return to Ravnica and certainly Ravnica Allegiance. It was still maybe a bit more generic high fantasy. There was still a lot of room for things like the Nephilim were in that set, for example. They would never put the Nephilim in Return to Ravnica or Ravnica.
Well, yeah, they fucking
Allegiance.
refuse to. Yeah.
Well, yeah, quite, and for good reason. It just doesn't really fit. And the fact that this avatar is, it's got like a demon goat head mask. It's wearing like a dress. It's got the breastplates have like faces on them. It's got big black wings. It's just in this classic RK Post in terms of it's also got like this kind of dark fantasy lightning aesthetic going on. One of my favorite all-time card arts is Lightning Angel, again by RK Post. And yeah, I love the idea that this very sort of like grim dark fantasy creature is not only on Ravnica but is attached to the Rakdos, and the fact that in its canon that Rakdos' shadows become tangible. Like, what does that even mean? His shadow takes on a cruel life of its own.
Well, it's like Peter Pan, right?
Much
Less fun. Much less fun.
Oh yeah, much less fun, Peter Pan. There we go. This one doesn't really fit in with the rest of Avatars either. So again, like you, I looked at all the kind of joining signifiers for these creature types. Avatars don't have a hugely broad one, but many of them seem to have its power and toughness is equal to something. So whether it's the cards in your hand or your life total or whatever else. Avatar of Discord, obviously being a Rakdos card, gives you a 5/3 for 3 with flying, which is a very good rate. But it forces you to discard 2 cards, right? Or you can let it die, and then it gives you some sort of effect, which is a very Rakdos thing as well. So yeah, I just keep coming back to it. I still don't really understand the definition of an avatar, even in Magic, but this is probably my favorite one. It's absolutely fantastic. Like, yeah, everything about it.
Very cool. Yeah, it's one of the ones that I was willing to be like, I'm not sure where he'd go with this. So that's what I went for. Yeah, it's a very cool creature type. Right, so my number 2, a bit more traditional. You gave me. Also, this is quite curious. Both this one and Centaurs both had exactly 66 entries.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know if you looked at how many there were for each creature type.
I didn't in terms of when I was going to give them to you, but obviously it was interesting to see how many of each thing there were, because I thought there were way more Centaurs, and there just isn't.
Right. I mean, in general, I'd have thought there was way more Sphinxes, but it turns out, I mean, I guess 66 is still quite a lot. But yes, Sphinxes is the second creature type you gave me. And Sphinx is a doozy. Sphinx is a little bit like Avatar in terms of, like, it's a lot of big splashy effects. Like, being the big creature of blue, which is kind of what the Sphinx has now become in terms of like merfolk versus Sphinx compared to like elves versus hydras, right? In terms of the small typical creature and the big typical creature. The thing I love about Sphinxes is they all play into this idea of knowledge or riddles in some way, shape or form. There's only a few of them that have really basic things, like even like Rescue a Sphinx. Okay, cool, it's bouncing in and bouncing something out. That makes sense from a non-Sphinx point of view. But you have loads of really cool ones. You have things like Arbiter of the Ideal that had like this manifesting things. You've got even things like Atemsis, which is obviously an alt-win condition, requiring you to have all the different answers in your hand at the same time. You've got Dazzling Sphinx, which plays my favorite mechanic from Chaos Wand, of where you exile until you hit your opponent's library until they hit a instant or sorcery, and you get to play it for free, that kind of thing. Really, really like it. Even like the games, right? The games that you can play with some of these cards, like Aspiria the Inscrutable. It hits deals combat damage to a player, and they have to name a card. Or you name a card, and they reveal their hand, and then if it's in their hand, you get to go and search your library for a creature with flying. This idea of, oh well, you got to play all the things that are in your hand, or if it's the only one that I know about, and all these kinds of things. Really,
Master
really cool.
of Predicaments is one of my favorites.
Exactly, right? Of where you play this little game of where you choose a card in your hands, and your opponent has to guess whether it's got CMC higher or lower than 4. If it gets wrong, you get to play it for free. Amazing. There's nothing better. There's nothing better than making your opponents lose a game, right? And I would have gone for either of those two had it not been for the fact that they were a bit too, I want to say like the word predatory, because they felt like they specifically gun for one player. Whereas the one I chose was Conundrum Sphinx.
Oh, good choice.
So Conundrum Sphinx is 2 blue for a 4/4 Sphinx. Flying, obviously. When Conundrum Sphinx attacks, each player chooses a card name. Then each player reveals a top card of their library. If the card a player revealed is the same name as they chose, they put it into their hand. If they don't, they put it onto the bottom of their library. Now, this is really interesting because everyone gets to play. It's not like, oh, I'm attacking this one person and keep dicking them over, or I'm going to keep making this one person make a choice. It involves the entire table, right? And yes, okay, 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to choose your most prevalent, like, you know, basic choice, like going to be island, swamp, plains, depending on what color you're pairing this with. But for the most part, I like the idea that you can, if you're smart enough and you can manipulate your future and you do know a little bit about the future, it's not a conundrum anymore. Like, you know the answers and you get the facts. And it's literally just it attacks and it draws you a card. That's not even that strong in terms of an ability. But the fact it creates this really dynamic game, like, it's so interesting. And it's so engaging. And I also find that this, in terms of artwork, the artwork's by Michael Cormack. It doesn't look like a 4/4. It looks way bigger than a 4/4. Again, the up angle that you've got of it, it's basically flying over a tower top, and you're looking up at it from the ground. So it kind of gives it this kind of really imposing kind of feeling, which a lot of Sphinxes have anyway. Like, design wise, their aesthetics are super diverse. You've got things like lion heads, bird heads, straight up ladies, just lady folk, like on Sphinx Ambassador. It's even got boobs. Why would a Sphinx need boobs? I don't know. That doesn't matter. You've got nightmares, like a Nightmare Sphinx, and you've even got a Sphinx in a balaclava. Like,
I mean, yeah, that Enigma Thief,
yeah,
that picture
like
of Tame Mingus artwork
that's
is I still find
amazing.
so fucking funny.
I
Like,
know.
oh, I wonder which of these rogues flew over and stole this item. Could it be
Yeah.
the giant Sphinx one? We'll never
I wonder if
know.
it's the only one that can fly. Yeah,
Yeah.
crazy.
I
Yeah.
think the artwork for me is also pretty cool because one of the defining features of what makes a Sphinx is the fact that it's got like a human face or humanoid face most of the time. Like that is like a big part of like the Sphinx mythology is that it's got the face of a human. So having Conundrum Sphinx with it's not a shrouded face, but it's certainly not the focus of the piece. And then you look at things like also like Enigma Thief as we said, but like Dream Eater, the Darken artwork from Ravnica Allegiance, or even things like Metamai the Ageless by David Palumbo, where it's, you know, the Sphinx is shrouded in shadow. You think, oh my gosh, like even the only thing we know about Sphinxes is what they look like. The rest of them is mysteries. When you take away what they look like a little bit, it becomes even more imposing. Yeah, very good choice.
Yeah. Again, the diversity, even though they do kind of do the same kind of thing, you can kind of do a little bit of anything with them. Sphinx in general are very, very cool. I liked Azor. I liked Alhameret. Whenever they show up in stories, they're really they're really engaging. It's a shame that Spiri is now, you know, a trophy, but you know, hey, whatever. Again, like, yeah, it's really, really cool creature type. Great choice. Very cool.
Yeah, nice. The next one you gave me is Pirate. Straight up pirate. Yeah,
shocking,
love a
right?
pirate. I mean, pirates are cool. We've spoken a lot about pirates because obviously they're sort of back in the EDH meta, at least because of Commander Legends. Obviously, brought an influx in, and I'm really happy actually that they brought in a whole bunch of pirates that didn't necessarily seem to be set on Ixalan. Like there were a whole bunch of them, like even oh my gosh, Dockside Extortionist, for example, who's a goblin pirate, absolutely not an Ixalani goblin. And there's even like a couple of Minotaur pirates, which like Glinthorn Buccaneer, which are like, oh, I don't think that's on Ixalan because wasn't Angrath meant to be like the only bull-headed man on Ixalan kind
Exactly.
of thing. But it's, you know, it's all that kind of stuff. I mean, Pirate's cool. Almost all pirate cards are incredibly flavorful as well. So it was not necessarily hard to pick a favorite, but it was almost like, oh wow, they've really done a fucking good job. There's 116 pirate cards, or at least the printings of like sort of unique pirate cards. Pirate Ship is obviously one of the most famous ones, which is a human pirate for a pirate ship. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you think pirate construct, right?
I mean, sure.
Or vehicle.
I
guess it can't be a vehicle anymore. I guess.
Yeah, I mean, well, then they had Reef Pirates, which was summon ships. So I don't fucking know. Do you know what I mean? Like
Magic had no idea what it was doing for a long time.
Absolutely none. I mean, in Jumpstart, we had Rashard an airship as well, which was a human pirate. I think that was on purpose, which is a fucking airship. So yeah, they just do whatever the hell they want. I mean, mostly all of them are fine. I should not like pirates in general because they have a lot of steal effects, and I'm not a huge fan of steal effects. I think they get away with it because it takes a couple of steps to do the steely thing. It's not just like confiscate or bribery or something where it's just like, oh, I just get your thing. So, well, hang on, what the fuck? Like, usually you have to like jump through a couple of hoops or like play the role, if you like. I'm surprised that there aren't more 3-color pirates. I know that Admiral Becca Brass is like the Grixis one because that was the one that tied all the Grixis, because Pirates in Ixalan were red, black, blue. So I know that was the legendary that would tie them all together. But for the most part, they're all Rakdos or Is It, weirdly. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. I mean, there are a few Dimir ones, but that seems to be on the back burner. The one that I picked as my favorite one is actually a Dimir one, and that is the one and only Hostage Taker.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, how could it not be? 2 blue-black for a human pirate, 2/3. When Hostage Taker enters the battlefield, exile target artifact or creature until Hostage Taker leaves the battlefield, and you may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled. And you may spend mana as a mana of any type to cast that spell. I mean, this is one of the various things that pirates tend to do as well. So this kind of steely, then I get to cast your thing. Generally speaking, that's not like the pirate mechanic, but it fits into this idea. I'm looking on Scryfall now. Pardon me. The card next to it is Hull Breacher. RIP Hull Breacher in EDH. You can fuck off. And that is something that essentially steals other people's draw. Like its effect is that you are taking the ability of someone else's thing for you to gain benefit, and that tends to be something that a lot of other pirates tend to do as well. I almost went for example, there are 2 others that I think are honorable mentions, and that's Captivating Crew for a 4/3, 3 and a red. Tap 3 and a red. I keep saying that. 3 and a red. Gain control of target creature and opponent controls until end of turn. Untap that creature. It gains haste until end of turn. Activate this ability anytime you cast a sorcery. So again, you're stealing other people's creatures. And then Direfleet Daredevil is a 2/1 for 2. First strike, when Direfleet Daredevil enters the battlefield, exile target instant or sorcery card from an opponent's graveyard. You may cast that card this turn. You may spend any mana of any color type, blah, blah, blah. If that card will be put into a graveyard this turn, exile it instead. So it's, again, it's all this kind of plundering other people's resources, but for me, just in a more fun way than, I just get your thing. The reason I went for Hostage Shaker over any other card it has to be the Wayne Reynolds artwork. Like, I mean, it's Wayne Reynolds. Exactly. You can't say much more than that. Like, what are pirates if not just an amalgamation of buckles and swords and guns? And that is exactly what you get Wayne Reynolds in for. The regular artwork has a pirate. I've always taken this to be a vampire that they're taking hostage.
Yeah, it is. Yeah?
I've always been slightly confused by what is seemingly the pirate coat draped over them, but I suppose that's you then taking control of that creature. If you were to, do you know what I mean?
Like, it's strange because there's an alternate artwork, right, where it's a dinosaur
the alternate
instead.
Artwork, yes, again by Wayne Reynolds. I love it when they get the artists to do two artworks, and I think it's always so cool because you could play both of them in say like a kitchen table deck or something and have like both artworks and be really cool. The promo artwork is the same character. It's a slightly different art style, but they're taking hostage of a raptor, and the raptor looks like really sheepish.
You're really perturbed, like, oh god, help, please.
It's a raptor, and its claw arms are literally right next to the pirate's like abdomen. It wouldn't take anything just go slash and kill the pirate, but no, it's going, oh no, I've been taken hostage.
So good.
It's really good. And yeah, I mean, just again, what else can you say? Like, it has to be. I mean, if there was any other tribe other than, say, goblins that you'd want to have Wayne Reynolds doing, it's pirates. And so, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I had to choose him. There was no way around it. Amazing, good. Okay, so from Buccaneer swashbuckling cool people, to some advisors, some civilized, dignified advisors. So this was like a left field one. This is one where I get, weirdly enough, 65 different advisors. So I've had 66, 66, and 65. I don't know how you did this. The trend doesn't continue for the last two, unfortunately.
Then clearly I didn't do it at all then.
Well, no, I know. So I got to the third one. I was like, oh, okay, maybe it's only off by one. And then the fourth one, I was like, oh, okay, no, this is completely by luck. So surprisingly large amount of advisors. The thing I found surprising was that a lot of them are from Portal 3 Kingdoms. Like a lot of it's not like they've been errated. Like a lot of them were just simply creature type advisor, which is really, I guess, when you're talking about like feudal Japan, right? Like I guess that was a lot of how that works. And same with Kamigawa. There's a lot of advice in Kamigawa because war requires not only the soldiers, but it also requires the thinkers, right, and the tacticians. And a lot of them.
Sorry, is it China or Japan for Portal 3 Kingdoms? I thought it was China.
It might have been China, actually. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, absolutely. Man, I am so bad at history. Cool, good. Well, a combination of feudal Japan in Kamigawa, and then also you had the Chinese-based Portal 3 Kingdoms set. Again, lots of advisors. That's just how war works. In general, I really like Portal 3 Kingdoms because it puts a lot of terminologies like the burning of Jinghu and things like that. Like it changes the way that almost like the flavor of cards, just having like statements of war being presented on cards, I thought was really, really cool. I didn't go for any of those in particular because they have very basic effects, and they're not hugely flavorful from my point of view. There are a lot of advisors in Ravnica as well, specifically the Azorius Guild, shockingly. I don't know if I think Bruvek looks like he's definitely from Ravnica, doesn't he?
I've often wondered this. I think the kind of pomposity of his title as well seems to suggest that he's American.
Like his dress.
I can't quite read the script. It seems like law magic. Yeah,
exactly. So my honourable mention, and this I was originally going to go for Brago's representative, specifically because I thought the idea of the ability of while voting you get an additional vote. I was like, oh, that's so super flavorful and so indicative of his corruption and imperialistic bureaucracy. I was like, that's such a good idea. But then also right next to it's Ballot Broker that was released in Conspiracy 2 that does the exact same thing. I'm like, oh, it's not that fucking unique then, is it? It doesn't really matter, whatever. Cool. So I was like, well, let's go for something that's a little bit more interesting. So I went for Azor's Elocutors.
Oh, nice.
And this is a card for 3 hybrid Azorius, for a creature type human advisor. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a filibuster counter on Azor's Elocutors. Then if Azor's Elocutors has 5 or more filibuster counters on it, you win the game. Whenever a source deals damage to you, remove a filibuster counter from Azor's allocutors. So what I liked about this first and foremost is it was a mention of Azor before we actually got Azor. It was also that when I first got this card, I think I got it in foil, and I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be really great." Before realizing it's not actually that efficient, and you can't really do it very easily. But a filibuster counter. Now there are some strange counters in Magic, as 8 Spice Rack has pointed out fairly recently. Like there are various different stupid counters. I thought filibuster counter was really cool, and it made a lot of flavorful sense because filibustering is when you're, when you're debating verbosely just to delay the inevitable decision being made. And I just love that idea of these advisors. Basically, if at each turn that they don't get interacted with and they're allowed to continue spouting their nonsense, you get one step closer to victory. But anytime anyone interrupts you or interacts with you in any way, shape, or form, be it like a ping or be it even one attack, and then they get interrupted and they have to start over again. Like I think that's such a cool idea. Like it's really representative of the Azorius in general. Like I think this idea of bureaucratic law. I mean, there are a few other advisors within them. Like I think the other one that I was tempted to go for was 1 second, Council of the Absolute, because I liked this idea of where they dictate not only what you can say and what you can, not only what you do, but what you can say, like how everyone can act. Like the idea of law magic is really fucking scary. But I like the idea of these guys are just floundering about. They're not actually actively warring or actively using their magic. It's literally just sitting back and going, just leave us alone, and we're just gonna keep talking shit, and if you leave us alone and talk enough shit, then hey, well, we passed a law that makes it so you can't do this and you can't do that and you can't do this. I thought that was really interesting. It is funny how many different types of advisors there are. Like Generous Patron from Battle Bond is really cool. This idea that it supports 2, and whenever you put counters on opponents who are creatures control, you draw a card. I like the idea that Ib Halfheart is a goblin advisor, and all he does is make your blocked goblins die and sacrifice your lands to make more goblins. Like, what kind of advice is a goblin supposed to give? Bad advice. That's what it gives. It gives super bad advice. There are also some really strong cards in here. I think Campbell, Kethis, Leovold, for example, like even Karlov. Like there are some really strong advisors across the creature type, and they'll have fairly diverse abilities. So it was kind of an interesting class of where I'm like, I feel at the beginning they kind of knew exactly where they wanted to go with it, and now they kind of can slap it here and there as they wish, right? Like Mavinda, Student's Advocate from Strixhaven, the one that allows you to get spells back from your graveyards, and it's kind of like a tutor. Like that makes sense for me. Like most tutors and teachers should probably be advisors as well. Like it's a really cool, diverse creature typing.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting, like, just a baseline to say that something's an advisor. Suddenly they have some sort of power that they're behind the scenes of, and it's like if they're going to be like naughty or nice about it. It's like you have cards like Taser Karlov, for example, or Snickering Squirrel from the Unsets, and you're like, oh, these people are definitely fucking nefarious. Like, just look at them; they're going to be up to no good whatsoever. And then you have people like, Mavinda, Student's Advocate, or
wait, has that squirrel
like
got a fucking tash on it?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's the whiskers, but yeah,
it does.
And then you have
fucking... I guess whatever.
You have like a SRAM, senior artificer, as you say. Like these people are obviously there for the greater good of like whatever they're trying to do. And I think advisors are pretty cool. I think it's a good creature type. It's a kind of weird one that you'd think, oh, why would you have that in Magic? But actually, it has a lot of ground that it can cover. Very cool.
Like I have one honorable mention, and that was Flavor Judge. I thought if we're choosing flavor picks, I thought it was really funny that they have a card that basically goes, explain what is happening right now, and if this ability makes sense, and if you can do it in a way that someone outside of the game goes, yeah, that makes sense. You can justify how your bird is, driving a bat skull whilst holding 3 swords and a pair of boots. I just love that idea of where you get the fucking flavor judge in. That's so funny. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. All right. Well, my next one that you gave me was the creature type Spectre. This is an interesting one. This kind of falls into the never-ending pool of like, oh, what's the difference between like a spirit and a spectre and a this and a that and another? Like there seems to be like 5 or 6, like a shade, versus a spectre versus a spirit. I mean, I guess spirits. Weirdly, there are only 25 cards that I found which had this spectre creature type, and there is a weirdly unifying look to them for like almost all of them, not all of them, but for most of them, they are a rider riding the back of a winged beast, and it's usually some sort of like Grim Reaper looking motherfucker, which is kind of an interesting thing. Like Wizards clearly have found some sort of mythology or lore behind specters that they really like nailed to with these card types, and they're from like all over Magic's history as well. They're not just recent things. I have found the unifying theme with these Spectre cards tends to be in terms of their mechanics, either -1/-1 counters or some sort of like withering effect like that, or making opponents discard permanents or putting things in the graveyard. It's usually that kind of very classic blue-black thing of, you know, racking someone's mind or sanity and all that kind of thing. There are a couple of red Spectres as well, which is kind of nice, or like at least some Rakdos and Grixis ones. But for the most part, they're in blue-black. I mean, all of them look really cool. Like, I'm not usually one for like spikes and dragons and things like that. I mean, my favorite color in Magic is black, but I usually like the more sort of like abstracty things rather than sort of like, I guess you'd call it like metal, like horror, like anything you'd find on like a 1980s metal album. I'm not usually huge on it, despite my love for Arcade Post. But most Spectres actually look pretty cool. The one that I've gone for, and this is purely a nostalgia thing, is Night Vale Spectre. Night Vale Spectre is blue black, as in Dimir, 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 from Gatecrash, and it is a creature type Spectre flying. Whenever Night Vale Spectre deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top card of his or her library. You may play cards exiled with Night Vale Spectre, and it's 2/3. The artwork is by Minium. This is a pure nostalgia card for me. So obviously this is the set that I started really playing Magic properly, and this was just one of those cards where I was like, this is just what? Like a 2/3 flyer for 3 with upside? Obviously, it's that rare, but yeah, everything about it. It's also just incredibly classic looking. Like it's essentially a Grim Reaper riding the back of a necrotic dragon. I always thought it was a Drake until you look very closely at the bottom of the artwork as it is on the card, and you do see legs, so that does suggest to me more dragon than Drake. But yeah, just absolutely fantastic. There's also a promo artwork of this by Stephen Belladin, which I never knew about. I don't like it as much as the Minion one, but it's also still pretty cool. Yeah, just this whole thing, the idea of it flying around the tower tops of Ravnica, like screeching, making everyone like lose their sanity, like clearing a path for the Dimir to kind of influence people, and just that whole kind of weird cognitive distance about the Dimir Guild, that no one knows about them, and yet they have their fingers in every pie. And if they are part of like the 10 guilds, how did no one know that they existed, but they also kind of work in the shadows? Like, it's this weird thing where they kind of expect you to buy that all of these tablets, which have all of the 10 insignia on them, just sort of exist, but no one really knows who the 10th one is.
Yeah.
And then they have these flying specters just like bidding around the skies of Ravnica, and everyone's like, oh, I wonder what guild they belong to. I just really like that idea. And yeah, just everything about this card is absolutely classic, and I really love it.
I guess they're kind of like anti-Archons, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, like, Archons are also not good. Archons tend to be like kind of evil, even the white ones. They tend to terrorize people.
Like, where do they choose their mounts? Are they born with their mounts? Like,
well, someone like Uragos, the Empty One from Dominaria, is attached to their mount. So I wouldn't be surprised if they are all like, they're essentially just, because they're abstract, aren't they? They're specters.
Yeah, exactly.
So even though they might have the form of a rider on the back of a thing, they are probably just one in the same, you know.
Yeah, I've always found them very interesting. It was one of those ones I was like, again, curiosity-wise. I think one of my favourite cards in Magic is the Draxus Spectre, which now I look at it, I've seen it's been downshifted to uncommon. I'm like, boo downshifting. Yeah, very cool creature.
I mean, some of the like visuals for these specters are really interesting. Like Needle Spectre from Eventide is riding like the back of a giant hornet, which you would usually attribute to like the fairies of the plane, because they have like kind of an insectile kind of affinity. They do that classic thing of like the Panther Warriors on Dominaria, where the fairies on in Lorwyn are slightly insectile, but they also ride the back of other insects, and you're like, okay, pick a lane. But yeah, so like the fact that this is a Grim Reaper riding the back of a giant hornet is like, holy shit, like that is terrifying.
Yeah, they all do actually have size, right? They're all very Reaper-like, which is again quite
all
cool.
Like pikes, which have like kind of hooks on them and stuff. Yeah. Scythe Spectre as well by Vincent Pruce. The card isn't by Vincent Pruce. The artwork is. I mean, just horrifying. This kind of weird plague drake that it's riding. Yeah, I just think, again, slightly underrated, a little bit like Advisor. Like, I couldn't imagine Magic without these cards, despite the fact that you could probably just be like, oh, they're spirits, you know. But yeah, cool.
Very cool. Okay, so from one slightly underrepresented tribe to another, Gorgon. You gave
Yeah,
me
I love a
Gorgon.
Gorgon.
Again, this is like with Spectres, they have, when you only have, like, say, again, 19, so this is where I realised that the theme had fallen apart in terms of 66 or 65 creatures of the type. Only 19. I was surprised. I expected there to be a few more, but then when I thought about it even a little bit more, I'm like, oh, actually, yeah, they never fucking print Gorgons. They've only got 2 planes that Gorgons seem to exist on, which is Ravnica and Theros, and we don't even get that many of them when we go there.
No.
It seems like they're kind of stuck in terms of, like, mechanically what to do with Gorgons, and I understand why, because a lot of them do have Death Touch, or a lot of them do things like whenever they're blocked or block a creature, that creature is destroyed. Like, obviously, Gorgons throughout history and throughout, like, old fantasy, they petrify you, right? They look at you, you look them in the eye, and then you get turned to stone. I think they pushed this a little bit more with when they went to Theros. So you've got things like Keepsake Gorgon, which when it gets monstrosity, it destroys a non-Gorgon creature. Hithonia the Cruel does it, but to all non-Gorgon creatures. This idea of, you know, you kill if you touch it or if you look upon it. That theme I think is fantastic. I guess there's only so many different ways you can kind of do it. Like, I find Sisters of Stone Death is like the premier, like the legendary one, and that's it forces creatures to block it, then it removes a creature from the game that blocks it, but then you can also enthrall it afterwards, and you can put it into the play under your control, which, as far as I'm concerned, who needs a lump of stone after you've turned it to stone, right? So flavor-wise, I thought that didn't necessarily really work. The one that works for me the most out of all of them, I think, is Zathrid Gorgon.
Interesting. So Zathrid Gorgon is the only Gorgon which isn't on Theros or Ravnica.
Yes, Chandalar, exactly.
Chandalar, right? So that's a cool choice, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I don't know about Visara the Dreadful, actually. I'll have to look up her as well. She might not, I think she might be Dominarius. I think she's early magic. But anyway, point being, the thing about Zathrid Gorgon, 5 and a black for a 3/6 Gorgon. Death Touch, 2 black and tap. Put a petrification counter on target creature. It gains defender and becomes a colourless artifact in addition to its other types. Its activated abilities can't be activated. Creature. So yeah, this is basically exactly what you'd expect from a Gorgon. This idea of you turn your victims to stone and they are no longer usable. Again, is that more flavorful than just outright destroying? I think so. I think there's way more flavorful. They're not technically dead. They're still in play. That you can't necessarily easily reanimate them unless you have to then, you know, sacrifice and bring them back again. Also, artistically, it's one of the more effeminate looking Gorgons, because I mean Medusa was, for all intents and purposes, a very lady. I know in recent media, like, they've made them a bit more reptilian, a little less like attractive. But as far as I'm aware, back in, like, it was originally written to be, you know, somewhat of a seducer as well as a.
I think, yeah, a lot of the sort of monsters in Greek myth, a lot of it was to do with seducing, that kind of weird, like, seduction of evil and monstrosity, and then turning into evil things. Like harpies and sirens and stuff are beautiful until you see their true selves, and then they suddenly become awful because it's all like the folly of man, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sirens as well, falling into that same idea of beauty that's hiding a malice. I mean, the only one out of all of the Gorgons that doesn't really follow this is Damia, Sage of Stone, and she had kind of more like a Sphinx. You can kind of tell by the fact that she's the only one who's like triple color. The only blue Gorgon we get. Every other Gorgon is black or black green. I don't think we have a single mono green. No, we don't.
No, yeah, you're right. No, yeah, that's weird.
So Damia, of having the blue, she has like a different ability. If you skip your draw step, beginning of your upkeep, if you have fewer than 7 cards, draw cards equal to the difference. Again, they kind of present her more like a Sphinx with that ask your query and be on your way, just don't look her in the eye. Like, cool, like the flavour of it, realistically, you're going there to seek counsel from her, but obviously don't, you know, she's maybe one of the nicer Gorgons out there. The one that also really stood out for me was the flavour text on Archetype of Finality. She sees mortals not as they wish to be, but as what they will become.
Ooh.
And it's true, because as soon as she looks at them, they die. And that's exactly what they will become. They'll become everything eventually becomes dead. So I thought it was just a nice, succinct, like, little tongue-in-cheek kind of flavor text for that. I don't. How does a Gorgon stop everything else having death touch? Not sure. Not worth questioning. Magic. But again, I like the idea. There's a succinctness to their creature typing that they all kind of do a similar thing. Okay, one or two of them might do something slightly different, like Mask Gorgon, Freakus Mender. But I feel like going forwards, they're probably going to continue this. I don't really know where else they can push it, where it doesn't feel like it stops feeling Gorgon-y. Like when a Gorgon doesn't have death touch, I'm like, oh, but it's a Gorgon, right? It's like a dragon not having flying.
It's so like Vraska is obviously our kind of premier Gorgon character in Magic the Gathering, and actually I really love the fact that they brought Vraska back into the fold since Ixalan as like a prominent character and not just like one of those sort of side planeswalkers that sometimes pops up, if only because of the fact that they are a Gorgon and not just a straight up human, and the fact that Gorgons are like massively OP in terms of their power. They just need to look at something,
and you did,
and it turns to stone.
Right.
If I was on Ravnica, I wouldn't give a fuck about all the giants, all the trolls, the goblins, the spectres. I'd be piss scared of going anywhere near a sewer and seeing like some tendrils out the top of someone's head. I'd be like, what the fuck? Like, she killed Asperia.
Yeah, just off screen. Off screen.
Yeah,
no one gonna see it. Funny.
Yeah.
Didn't see it coming.
Hey. One of my favourite Gorgons, and it's because of the actual look of the physical card itself, is Pitiless Gorgon from Ravnica Allegiance. So at the pre-release, I played Golgari, and had 2 Pitiless Gorgons in my pre-release deck, and a 2/2 for 3 with Death Touch in that limited environment was very good. But just the fact that the hybrid card frame with the Alex Konstad artwork, which is a sort of very blue-greeny hue, and then the Green Gorgon with the hybrid card frame, with all the kind of contrast in the artwork, and the very simple text box as well. It's a very like clean-looking Magic card. So whenever that was on the battlefield, I was just like, oh, nice, this is fucking cool. So yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Good choice. What?
Thank you for giving me this one. This was a fun little 19 card gallery to look at. The next one you gave me was Homunculus.
Yeah. Again, I went for some quirky ones as well as ones I was like, because Pirate, I was like, I've got to give him Pirate, and then I went for someone that I just thought would just. I was curious more than anything else to see what you go for.
Homunculi in fantasy have got kind of like this kind of very broad thing. Like they're kind of ill-defined. Like the way that Magic has kind of gone for it is that they are mono-eyed sort of minion type things. I mean, there's a few of them that aren't like Court Homunculus, for example. But in fantasy, they range from a lot of different stuff, and different cultures have different sort of ideas of what homunculi are. I mean, I'm going to quote Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood rather than actual any fantasy, but obviously they took it somewhere. Like homunculi are kind of crafted creatures. They have been formed through magic and alchemy to be a thing, and I think that is true of some of the stuff in Magic as well. But yeah, they've definitely got their very own look. There's only 19 of them,
which again you think more, right?
2 of them are artifact creatures. That's bonkers. Court Homunculus, and then Dovin's Automaton, which is from Ravnica Allegiance. Was it Guilds of Ravnica? Ravnica Allegiance. Ravnica Allegiance, I think. I never knew that card existed. I played a lot.
Same. Yeah, same. I have no idea.
Dovin's Automaton. It's rad. It's this little robot with a hammer on the back of it. It's like this little Azorius homunculus. Obviously, the most famous homunculus of all time is Fibblethip, and we do have a card for Fibblethip, and obviously all the cards, the memes. But I mean, Fibblethip is really a very basic looking homunculus. It's just a little body with eyes. Like, actually, Flavorflea, I don't know how interesting Fibblethip is until we know more about them, because it's just a character that pops up now and again. The homunculi from Innistrad are some of my favourite looking ones, because obviously keeping in with the horror aesthetic, they have homunculus on Innistrad, which is pretty rad, and they're like little helpers, usually for stitches or for alchemists. They're kind of like little buddies that help out, and they don't really have a head. They literally just have the eye, with like the eye sort of socket making up the head, I suppose. But because they don't have eyelids, they have to have like these weird like scuba diver, like old timey scuba suit like face masks that have water in them, so the water just kind of sloshes around, like keeping their eye wet.
That's cool, right? That's lovely.
Oh, what a horrifying
I don't imagine.
existence.
Again, this is one of these things where we talk about like the chefs of the multiverse. Imagine being like an optician or a dentist in
Yeah.
on certain planes. Like these professions get really fucking weird.
Hmm. We have an Eldrazi homunculus in the form of Voracious Reader, which is the backside of Curious Homunculus as well, which is pretty cool. The one that I picked though is one of two. I was about to say only then is one of two mono white homunculi. So they're all blue except for the Dovin's Automaton, which is just straight up artifact. We have Aeromunculus, which is a homunculus mutant from the Simic Guild, so that's green blue, and then everything else is mono blue, except for mono white Jubilant Mascot, 2 and a white for a homunculus 1/1. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may pay 3 and a white. If you do, support 2. And then the flavor text reads, the competition is but one aspect of the spectacle. This little guy is from Battlebond. Battlebond has a huge affinity for homunculi, which is awesome. They're like they tend to be sort of like the referees and the sort of like ground staff of the battles in Battlebond, of like the arenas. I just love the idea that like this kind of really weird plane of Kylum with this really high concept thing for like the Battlebond games then has like these homunculus running around like making sure everything runs smoothly. Obviously, we also get Zindersplint, Eye of Wisdom from Battlebond as well, which partners with Okun. So we also do get a legendary there, which is also pretty cool. The homunculus from Battlebond are also really weird because they don't seem to have mouths. They are, again, like the Innistrad ones. They're just a giant eye.
Yeah, how do they eat?
How do they do anything? How do they walk around without getting like horrible like conjunctivitis or having like dust blown into their eyes or whatever? But this homunculus doesn't seem to mind. They're dancing around. It's Philip Berberon art, and it's absolutely joyful. They're dancing around with ribbons, and they've got a little costume on, which seems to be like a little referee's costume as well. So maybe they're also an official. And yeah, I just love it. There's so much movement and joy in this character, and the fact that it has support too. Like for a set called Battlebond, which there's no other concept which is more fighty than they go to this arena to fight each other. Like we often speak about that we wanted Magic sets that aren't necessarily always to battle, like Strixhaven, although it did have some elements of it, did a very good job of having like, oh no, there are other things going on as well. Whereas obviously Battlebond is literally just the battle plane. But because it was a draft set designed for two-headed giant, you also have like a lot of like supportive mechanics, obviously, like pun not intended, obviously the support mechanic is one, but there's lots of like when you do this thing someone else also gets a
Assist
thing like,
as well. Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
like victory chimes where it's people get like mana and stuff from you, and obviously in like multiplayer games like EDH that has a whole new dynamic where it's like, oh, I'm literally playing to help you out do a thing. And so yeah, just as a Magic card, it's a 1/1 for 3, and its only existence is to just be this joyful little friend that just comes in and helps you out. And yeah, I just
Like a little
absolutely
cheerleader.
love it.
It's
Yeah,
great.
it's a little cheerleader. I absolutely love it. It's great.
Yeah, it's funny because when I looked originally at Monk, because again going through the creature types, there's a few that I was like, oh, let's see how many there are there. Because I did a little check just to make sure it isn't just like, oh, there's 3 of them. And as soon as I looked through, I was like, oh, okay. So Bonded Fetch, for example, is one of my all-time favorite like a hasty blue creature like back in the day for me was like really, really, really interesting. And I was looking through and I was like, I wonder what he's likely to. Oh no, yeah, he's going for Jubilant Mascot. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, great. I knew as soon as I saw it, I was like, yeah, it's fantastic. He'll talk some shit about the other ones for a little bit, and then he'll inevitably talk about this little ribbon dude.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad you didn't disappoint.
Yeah, love it.
Amazing. Right, cool. So going from relatively small pools of creature types. The last one you gave me was a fucking doozy. Rogue.
Yeah, I know you like rogues.
Oh man,
a fucking too.
Yeah, I did. I do really like Rogue. And do you know what's really funny is I was going to give you Phyrexian, and that because of the recent errattering, 226 cards got errated to the Phyrexian typing. I was like, you know what? No, I'm not going to do that to him. And there's 336 rogues. Oh god. Cool. So yeah, so I was looking through, and like I had to really hold back because there's so many that I'm like, okay, from an art point of view, like I how can I not choose this? Wonderbrine Root Cutters, art by Chippy, fucking stunning artwork. You've got Pestamite, Latchkey Fairy. Like there were so many different cards that came from like when I first started playing the game that have such evocation to me, like such visual evocation to me. And I was tempted to go a little rogue. pun very much intended, and choose like a sorcery or an equipment, because obviously there's a lot of tribal rogues out there as well.
Like Cloak and Dagger and stuff.
Yeah,
like
exactly. I was going to say Cloak and Dagger. If Cloak and Dagger did a little bit more, I would have chosen Cloak and Dagger. The other ones that I had were like knowledge exploitation, morsel theft, noggin whack. Noggin whack, this dude getting twacked by a fucking fish in the back of the head. That's one of my favourite artworks in all of Magic. Didn't go for any of those though. Again, I think rogues just have this idea of where it undermines like the creature typing, right? Of where if you have like a giant rogue, what is it doing? It's like, oh, it's a shifty giant, you know? It's like
to other giants, it can be fine, yeah.
Exactly, that makes sense. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I do like this idea of it allows you to almost like subvert the stereotype, as well as having, you know, the outliers of society, whether it be, you know, like syndicate enforcers from Orzhov, or, you know, like all of the Aetherborn. A lot of the Aetherborns were rogues as well. If it's like your temperament, I understand it makes sense to have it. Again, back
like
in the
the
day,
Noggles are rogues, aren't they? That
exactly.
Noggle cycle, yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's that idea of like you again playing against the norm, being a bit cheeky, a bit of a scamp. That all works quite well in my towards my temperament anyway. So really cool choice. In the same way that you went for Hostage Taker, I couldn't not go for Notion Thief.
Oh, you utter bastard.
I know. Well, this is right. Before the negative connotation of Hull Breacher, like, no one had issues with Notion Thief. No one gave a shit.
That's not true.
I didn't care. It didn't seem that most people cared. I've had this actual conversation about, like, what makes it different. It's like, one, okay, it's in 2 colours and it's a little bit more expensive. Like, it kind of feels more forgivable. It's also a 3/1. Like, being able to be pinged by anything seems like it's fine. But the reason I chose it is because, again, yes, I like steal effects, but what's better than stealing people's ideas, right? This is so evocative of Dimir, but in Dimir, it's like, I'm not trying to be a douche, we're information brokers, right? This idea of, because it's also got flash, right? It's 2 blue-black, human rogue for 3/1. It's got flash. If an opponent would draw a card, except for the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, instead that player skips that draw, and you draw a card. Oh, yum. This idea of where they have this big eureka moment. They have this lovely kind of like, I'm trying to think of good example, like Blue Sun Zenith or something. They're like, I've got this amazing idea. I'm going to draw all these cards and have all these, and Notion Thief just comes in and goes, nope. Nope, sir. These are now my ideas. I love the idea of it in his hand in the artwork. The artwork's by Clint Kearley. And the idea that like information, kind of like law magic, right? How these, it's almost like a strip of words. It's almost like a thought. It's almost a little bit like in Harry Potter, where they take memories out, right? For the what's the pensive? There we go.
Right.
Yeah, they take the memories out of their head, and it comes got that silvery kind of wispiness to it. I like this idea that he's reading someone else's idea. I mean, he doesn't look very happy about it, but you know, you don't look dark and moody and in the Dimir, what you're doing with your life. But I love me some steal effects, and this idea of stealing people's knowledge when they get too greedy, or they think they have a great idea, and you go, "That's my idea now." I couldn't help it. I really couldn't help it. I did try. I tried really hard. I came very close to Robber of the Rich, which is another steal effect, but in mono red outside.
Oh yeah, but like the red rogues, I've obviously got a big affinity for Grenzo Havoc Razor. I ran an EDH deck with Grenzo for a long time, and the red rogues, because they are. Like, I mean, it's not really much better because a lot of them do.
It's not much better, Andy. It's not.
But it's because it's impulsive draw effects. It's like, well, you never know what you're gonna get. Like, you're literally just smashing and grabbing. Whereas, I mean, Notion Thief.
I know, I'm sorry. Again, there's some really cool ones like Shard of Sagem that I just didn't think necessarily had like the flavour. Like Silkbind Fairy, again, one of my favourite artworks in all of Magic. Mark Cavotta doing a pink butterfly effect to the to the wings. And they've got like a little silkworm, and they use the silkworm's silk string to tap creatures down. That's great. That's amazing. But Notion Thief steals people's cards, Andy. I don't know what the fuck you want from me. That's my bread and butter. Like, I can't help it.
I mean, I picked 2 Dimir cards that do a very similar thing. So
yeah. So again, cool, diverse creature type. Does amazing things. There's 226 of them. I'm not going through all of the different honorable mentions. They're good.
Across all colours as well, which is kind of cool.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. Well, my last one. You did this on purpose.
I did.
There aren't actually that many of them, thank God. I mean, well, there are, but they're not called the thing that you gave me. You gave me Naga.
Yeah.
Great.
Obviously. Yeah. I gave you pirates to be nice, and I gave you Naga to be a troll.
What a rich heritage of snake people I can pull from. Oh, no. I can pull from 2 mainline sets and some ancillary ones. Brilliant. Thank you very much for that.
Hey, that's better than Gorgon. I mean, come on.
Yeah, but Gorgons are Gorgons.
Gorgons are also snake people, Andy. They should also be Nagas.
They are also snake people, but they are Gorgons. Whereas Nagas and snakes are the same thing. This isn't we've done this one episode and we will do another one. So, yes, obviously most of these are going to come from Amonkhet and Tarkir. Oh, I had to really think about that one then. But there are quite a few from like ancillary sets as well. They are sticking with Naga. Like, this is what they're going to be doing from now on. They're not going to go back to Snake, I don't think, unless they... I mean, do you know what? I mean, are there rumblings of a return to Kamigawa in some form or another?
They say they're doing like a neo future thing. I mean, it's already 2,000 years past what the time we saw it was anyway. Like, Kamigawa, the set was like ages and ages and ages ago. But even then, like, the 2 snakes from D&D, yes, I know that their creature typings were a little bit more set in stone. Like, we had tieflings rather than Azra. But even they're 2 very obviously Naga-like. And they're 2 different separate types of almost Naga-like things. One that looks like a snake and one that looks like human but has a snake body. Neither of those were Nagas either. So I guess maybe that's just specific to D&D. Who knows?
We will see.
Yeah.
There doesn't seem to be... I mean, I could be wrong. I could just be not like picking up on it. There doesn't seem to be a lot of synergy between them in terms of their abilities. It kind of really much depends on what plane they're on. But yeah, and like they're all very cool. Like you got the legendary ones as well, like DC in both of their forms, like Brute Tyrant and Undead Vizier is obviously a very prominent character in the Tarkir storyline. Kadena as well. Ikra Shadiki again. I mean, Tarkir was full of like really sort of prominent ones. Not so many prominent Naga in Amonkhet, which is kind of sad, but I think the fact that they were different creature typings in Amonkhet seemed to be sort of superfluous to the rest of the plot that was going on. Didn't actually seem to matter that there were Avon and sort of snake people and whatever else. One of the ones I was thinking about was Slitherblade, which is a blue for 1/2 Naga rogue with Slitherblade can't be blocked, and only just because it is just so simple and exactly what you want out of like a cheap costing Naga. Even though other things have that exact ability. But the flavor text reads, some Naga initiates move as silently as the sun's reflection on the water. And just everything about it was just a very clean looking card. I also just like, I think I like the Amonkhet ones more than I do the Tarkir ones, actually. Sidewinder Naga, I just love the idea of the type of snake that it is. And the Victor Adami Minga's artwork is just really like cool and really evocative of like, oh, which out of the races can like traverse the dunes on Amonkhet the best? Oh, it's obviously the snakes, which is really, really cool. The one that I did end up picking was an Amonkhet one, and that is Vizier of the Menagerie. Which is 3 and a green for a 3/4 Naga cleric. You may look at the top card of your library. You may cast the top card of your library if it's a creature card, and you may spend mana as though you have any mana of any type to cast creature spells. Vizier of the Menagerie. So the Viziers in Amonkhet are the kind of senior elite helpers and advisors to the 5 gods, and so obviously they're evocative of whatever they want to do. This one's obviously a Vizier to Ronus, and obviously it's also another cobra-headed snake, which is kind of a cool optic as well, but not all of them have to be, or all of them are. A big part of Ronus's trial is traversing his monument, and it's basically just full of like jungle and animals that are going to like come and get you and eat you, and you've got to like make it through without being eaten or killed by all these animals. And we were talking a lot last time we spoke about Amonkhet, because we've done about 3 or 4 times now where we just drop into Amonkhet chat, where Amonkhet has this really like huge swinging pendulum between like it's about the crops and everyone's going to help each other reach this glorious end, and the way we're going to do that is by killing each other, and it's this kind of swinging back and forth pendulum, like, oh, it's going to be a glorious afterlife, that means that we're all going to be turned into a zombie army, and the Vizier of the Menagerie in kind of a quiet way, actually, I think really exemplifies that, because if you look at the artwork again by Victor Adami Mingas, it's quite a kind looking soul. Like the Vizier is not in a combat pose. They're surrounded by the animals of the menagerie that they care for, and they've got like a little beetle in their palm. They're resting their head gently on like a giant cat. I'm so bad with cats, I couldn't tell you what this one is. It's a leopard? No, a jaguar? A lion.
That looks like a lion. That's like a female lion. Yeah,
all right,
okay,
cool.
On it, yeah. It could be a cougar, maybe.
It could be a cougar. Whatever it is. It's a big cat. But none of them are in like combat form, and certainly this card isn't like it's a 3/4, which is not bad, even for 4. but it's not necessarily, you're not swinging in with Vizier of the Menagerie, right? It's not pumping up other creatures. It's allowing you to play the creatures. So flavorfully, the fact that it's running the Menagerie of Animals, and the fact that it helps you get creatures is obviously on point anyway, which is kind of nice. But I really like the idea that this is a very sort of serene looking scene with a bunch of very nice looking animals that are being bred and kept so that they can tear and rip apart initiates when they go through Ronus's trial.
Yeah, he's a cleric, right? Like, what's clerical about what he's doing?
Oh, could you leave off about clerics?
I was so tempted to give you cleric, but I looked at how many there were. I went, I'm not going to do that to
but also what I kind of like is that I kind of get the antelope, I kind of get the lion, I kind of get the whatever that is, that bird, eagle, I don't know what it is, the beetle, and the I guess it's another sort of flying centipede looking insect thing that are also in this image. How deadly are they if they're being kept in for the trial?
I'm pretty sure the insects are fucking huge on Amonkhet, if I remember correctly. There's a giant scorpion for sure, because it's the fell stinger. Like, maybe these are just bubbies?
I think they're just maybe just incredibly poisonous. I'd much rather take on a lion than have like even a small swarm of those beetles come at me. I'd be terrified.
Yeah.
terrified.
Yeah, the mummy's told me scarabs are not nice to be around.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course. Well, there are plenty of scarabs on Amonkhet, case in point. But yeah, I don't know if that was the intention of this card or the art brief. I kind of just feel like that's the intention of the entire block, as we've spoken about enough times, is like pretty much behind every card, even the nice looking ones, there is this really horrifying truth. And the horrifying truth of this is that this very sweet looking Naga cleric is breeding these animals to kill other people. But they've got to take care of them because it's part of the thing. And yeah, I just really like the flavor behind it. I really like the fact that it kind of quietly evokes Amonkhet. I also really like the idea, and this is something that we have spoken about many times, and we never get closer to an answer. Obviously, humans living on Earth in the real world, where we are all humans, even though obviously we're apes, but humans are humans. In Amonkhet, because Avon and jackal-headed people and minotaurs and Naga and whatever other animal creatures people are, it's normal for them to be those animals. Did they consider themselves descended from animals? Because this is an animal, a humanoid animal, taking care of non-humanoid animals. And there are snakes on Amonkhet, like straight-up snakes.
Yeah, there's a snake hydra on Amonkhet. At that point, do you look up and go, Uncle?
Yeah, like there are no human hydras.
No, exactly. Oh god, that would be awful. Oh my god, no one ever draw that. Oh my god, Andy.
Human hydra.
That's awful.
I mean, well, technically changelings are human hydras, which I hate.
Sure, Morophon's as close as you get, and it's not nice to look at.
Nope. So yeah, Vizier of the Menagerie is my favourite Naga. Yeah, cool. It would be maybe one of my favourite snake warriors. Or snake clerics.
Yeah, snake cleric, yeah. Again, I never look at any of these and think it shouldn't be a snake. And one of the interesting ones is Naga Vitalis, I've only just noticed, has the skin that she's just come out of it, like, on the tree behind, but she's also wearing clothing. So was the clothing under the skin of the skin just shed?
Maybe they've just shed the skin and just put some clothing on.
That her tail's literally still in the very end.
Yeah, but it takes a while. Like, yeah, but they're not wearing.
Oh right, so she dressed halfway through. She's like, oh, I'm half immodest. Oh, my top half is shed. I kind of feel
like if any humanoid animal thing would do that, it would be a snake. Like they're still shedding, but the front half of them is like.
This is gonna be 4 hours. Yeah, I might as well get dressed while I'm doing it and do my hair.
It takes them quite a while. I mean, I know very little about snakes. I know one person who has a snake, and apparently it takes a while for them to do it.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess they don't really have any arms or legs to help get it off. Right, they just have to wiggle.
Well, this one does.
Little wiggle. Well, yeah, this one specifically does, but it's using the arms to get dressed as well. Cool, good. More questions. I thought I'd get some answers from doing this, giving this to you, but no, just more questions.
No. Something I did notice about Nagas is that obviously the snakes of Kamigawa had a lot of archers in them, right? That was kind of one of their big things. There is actually only one Naga archer from Clans of Tarkir, which I just thought was kind of interesting, that they sort of shed that aspect of them as well.
Yeah, I guess the fact that they could do like multiple bow and arrows at the same time is what made the Orochi so interesting, right? From Kamigawa. I still stand by like the extra armor, as much as Emoti's not. It's got some poor connotation. I do like this idea of take away its legs, but give it multiple sets of arms. Sure, magic. Go ahead, why not? But yeah, cool. Good.
Cool. There we go. Fantastic. That's a lot.
Yeah, another creature episode ending on a discussion about Nagas. Who knew? I specifically made it the last one in the list as well. I was going to see if you're going to change the order around. You didn't. Yeah, you didn't. Cool, good, amazing.
All
that
right,
was
guys.
fun.
Well, yeah, that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. If you have any kind of slightly subversive creature types that you want to know what our favourites of those are, please let us know. Also, if you have any favourites for the ones that we discussed today, we went through 10 creature types that we spoke about mainly, and then obviously a bunch that we spoke about around it. So obviously we did get through it. And some of these are quite big creature types, but others you sort of realise, even though they are big in the optics, and you think, oh yeah, well of course there must be loads of Gorgons in Magic. You think, oh, actually no, there really aren't. So yeah, please do let us know. Also, please let us know. I think we've done a planeswalking episode where we talked about planeswalkers specifically, and my sort of issue with the fact that they're all bipedal humans. What creature types would you want to see as planeswalkers? Like feasibly, like everyone goes, "Oh, I'd love to see an eye planeswalker."
Or
And it's like, fine, if yeah, great. No, I want to see a sensible planeswalker. What kind of planeswalker do you want to see? Please let us know. You can find us on Twitter at mtflavouring. Emails go to mtflavouring@gmail.com. My personal Twitter is at AndyManface. Nathan's, yours is
at the Fox in the Moon.
Not much to say this week in terms of our little wrap up, at least from me. It has been nice having the UK being slightly more open. I'm slightly hesitant still to be out and about, but even though I'm double vaxxed, but it has been nice being able to go to a pub with several friends and be like, we're all double vaxxed, we're all being sensible, it's fine. So yes, I'm enjoying it whilst it lasts, because it's still a little bit iffy, I feel.
Yeah, well, we still got to get back into winter again, haven't we? You know?
Oh yes.
So let's see how that all goes.
We'll see how it goes. All right then, guys. All that remains for me to say is thank you so much for listening. This has been Magic the Flavouring.
We'll see you soon.